So today I'm going to be exposing the G20 nation that I believe is currently printing money to buy Bitcoin. And I know how crazy that sounds, but what if I told you this central bank from this G20 country already owned over $200 billion worth of US equities, and they also owned around 0.5% of MicroStrategy that they bought in 2023. And yesterday, an announcement happened in this country that changes everything. A bunch of hardcore Bitcoin activists are currently forcing through a petition in the country that would force this country to add Bitcoin to its central bank's balance sheet. So I'd love for you guys to guess in the chat what country I'm talking about today, because you can see this is the news article that dropped yesterday. Bitcoin needs 100,000 signatures for this central bank to actually add Bitcoin to its balance sheet. And I've blurred out its name because I want to see if anyone can guess who I'm talking about. But of course, today we are talking about, drum roll please, I might get producer Pam to do a drum roll, but we're talking about Switzerland, okay? So the Swiss central bank already owns $162 billion worth of US stocks. And a lot of people have kind of called this strategy a little bit crazy for a long time in Switzerland, because we can see here, we can actually see what kind of equities they hold on their balance sheet. They hold $9 billion worth of Apple, $7 billion worth of Microsoft, $6 billion worth of Amazon. And a lot of people have thought, hey, this is absolutely nuts. You can see from this article here, the Swiss central bank's $90 billion stock portfolio is insane, okay? Nobody knows why this central bank in particular is going out there and buying equities. And they're actually one of the first central banks to go out there and actually buy equities. And it's fascinating because this country also already has a city called Bitcoin City, where Bitcoin and Tether, US dollar Tether, is already regarded as legal tender in the country, okay? So we have a lot to dive into in today's video, but I want to start by explaining the story of why the Swiss central bank has been printing its own currency for over 15 years to buy stocks. Well, we can see here, since the financial crisis of 2008, central banks around the world have been printing money to buy assets, but the Swiss central bank has been doing something different. Currently, they hold around $1 trillion of assets on their balance sheet, and you can see here that when you compare the assets held by the Swiss National Bank, the totality of the assets held by the Fed and the ECB and the BOJ work out to be worth 23% and 40% of the country's annual GDP. But the Swiss National Bank holds 127% of the country's GDP in regards to assets on its balance sheet. So it's printed a ton of money. That's the high level thesis of what's actually happening. And we can see here something different is very interesting. We can see this article explains that the US central bank and, the ECB, they're buying their own government bonds. So for example, the Fed, 55% of its capital is US government bonds and 40% is mortgage-backed securities. This is very different to the Swiss National Bank that has 20% of that capital invested in equities and more than half of that in US equities. So the Swiss National Bank has an $88 billion portfolio of US equities, which equals about 0.3% of the total US stock market. And when you actually have a look here, the Swiss National Bank, so this is the central bank, is the 35th largest investor around the world when you look at how much capital it holds. So the big question that a lot of people have wondered for a long time is, why is the Swiss National Bank continuing to buy equities? You can see this is a chart from 2014 to 2021. The amount of equities on the balance sheet has gone up by more than 6x. Now we get the super most recent data. You can see here, this trend is still continuing. It's not quite parabolic like it was in 2021, but it's still high, okay? It's still very, very high. $140 billion worth of equities. Now, why is that? Well, it has to do with this chart right here. So this is the currency of the US dollar measured against the Swiss franc. So something that's strange about this chart is the dollar's lost value against the Swiss franc. When I put this on regular, you can see how things are very different. And you can see how, in particular, in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, the dollar lost a lot of value against the Swiss franc. It's kind of been flat here for the past 10 years, since 2008. And this is strange because we know that the US dollar has appreciated against most other fiat currencies, but not the Swiss National Bank, not the Swiss franc. Now, why is that? Well, the Swiss franc was actually the fiat currency that's been backed by gold for the longest, okay? Most currencies all around the world depegged themselves from gold, like back in the 1915 era, 1920 era, during World War I. The entire world kind of left the gold standard in 1971, but not Switzerland. Switzerland only left the gold standard in the year 2000. So let me show you what I mean by that. Now, again, that's not entirely true. They've kind of already had like a percentage backing of gold reserves. So this Wikipedia article is going to clear that up for us. So we can see here, the Swiss franc has historically been considered a safe haven currency with legal requirements that a minimum of 40% of the currency, the fiat currency, must be backed by gold reserves. However, this link to gold, which dated back from the 1920s, was terminated on the 1st of May 2000, following a referendum making the franc fiat money, okay? So here in Switzerland, they take their referendums seriously, okay? And there was a referendum here in 2000 to say, okay, we're no longer going to be on the gold standard. Now, let's go back to the current referendum that is linked to Bitcoin, okay? So now I've exposed who this country is. We can see right now there are Bitcoin activists in Switzerland who are trying to push through their own referendum. So we can see they've created a group of Bitcoin enthusiasts in Switzerland are initiating a new effort to persuade Switzerland's national bank to incorporate Bitcoin into its reserves. We see here, first, they must get 100,000 signatures from local citizens to move forward with the petition. Now, this literally happened yesterday. So you can see here's one of the tweets coming out about it, and this was literally yesterday. Democracy takes time. We are moving forward in Switzerland. April 21st. You can see here's another tweet that got a lot of traction. 100,000 signatures are needed to change the constitution in Switzerland, which is incredible. So you can see this referendum is going to proceed for 18 months, and we need 100,000 signatures in Switzerland in the next 18 months to make it happen. Okay, here's another tweet that got a lot of eyeballs on Twitter pertaining to the topic. Got 1,000 likes, so that's a lot of impressions. I don't know how many impressions that would be. Maybe that'd be like 500,000 impressions, which is over 100,000. That's enough. That's enough impressions if we needed the votes, so to say. So a lot of people say, okay, this is going to be impossible. How are you going to actually convince 100,000 people to accept Bitcoin in your currency? Well, you guys might not know, but right now there is already 270 merchants in Switzerland who already accept Bitcoin in Bitcoin City, Lugano, okay? Lugano has been essentially renamed Bitcoin City in Switzerland because it was one of the first Bitcoin hotspots to actually accept Bitcoin. So take a look at this. I wrote this thread in the depths of the bear market for the Bitcoin Culture Twitter account, which has recently been rebranded to The Architect. But you can, as I wrote way back in 2023, you can now live on Bitcoin in one of the richest cities in the world. 270 merchants are accepting Bitcoin for payment in Switzerland in Bitcoin City. So I said, time for a thread explaining why Switzerland is the world's best kept Bitcoin secret. Okay, so in March 2023, the city mayor announced they were making Bitcoin and Tether legal tender, which of course is interesting, something we're going to talk about more in a moment. And they even created a city stablecoin, which again is strange. This here is the map, the BTC map that's actually tracking the amount of merchants in the city that are already accepting Bitcoin. So you can purchase art with Bitcoin, cars, food, drinks, tattoos and jewelry, fashion, real estate, or you could even pay your city taxes in Bitcoin, which is absolutely fascinating. Here is a really cool little video that we can see of you actually being able to purchase McDonald's with Bitcoin in the city of Switzerland. So as you can see, here's the transaction. I might blow this up for you guys. What a cool music. I'm going to play it. Okay, so now that's the whole video. We played the back half of it. We played the front half of it. So that is already what you can do in Switzerland today. Now, I have a digital Bobby. I thought the Swiss franc was backed by chocolate and cuckoo clocks. Den Lass in the chat. Bitcoin, the head of Switzerland. I don't know that Bitcoiner's name, but I know the name. It's a familiar name. Les fucking goes in the chat. One of my favorite Bitcoiners. Lead the way, Switzerland, 100%. Might do a video, Linda, explaining why Liz Warren is proposing a 1% wealth tax in America. I briefly looked into it, haven't had the time to really dive down that rabbit hole to do a video on it, but we will take a look at that. As Dingo Booty says, I was live earlier today on the Bitcoin News YouTube channel. So again, if you missed that, we might talk about that a little bit later. But I want to first talk about Switzerland, okay? Switzerland is fascinating for a number of reasons, okay? One of those is the fact that it is enormous. It is, as we can see from Investopedia, the 20th largest, I burped there, country in the world. So we can see it has a national GDP of $800 billion, okay? So it's a big country. It's a very, 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 very big country. You can see other countries up here like Turkey. So like Turkey, for example, they got 80 million people. They're a big country. Switzerland's nearly got a bigger GDP than Turkey, which is, again, absolutely huge. And if you have a look at their GDP per capita, $92,000, which is massive. You contrast that and compare that to Turkey. Turkey's GDP per capita is only $10,000. Okay, so Switzerland is a very rich country. They might be smaller population, but they actually have a very, very, very large, footprint per capita, per person, okay? That's why I think it's really interesting that the Swiss National Bank already kind of has Bitcoin exposure, okay? So I'm going to try my best to find the article, but you can see here, the Swiss National Bank has bought more than 400 shares of MicroStrategy. So this here is a little bit of an older article. It's about a year old, but this happened in May 2023. We can see very clearly the institutional investor owned 22,000 shares of the stock after acquiring an additional 400 shares during that quarter. So they actually own 23,000 shares. Okay, sorry, quick maths. So that's like a $3 million investment, okay? And right now, the Swiss National Bank owns approximately 0.2% of MicroStrategy. Sounds small, but that's a good chunk. Like BlackRock, for example, owns about 6% of MicroStrategy, and the Swiss National Bank owns 0.2% of MicroStrategy. That is absolutely massive, okay? I think it's big. I think it's bigger, and I think a lot of people aren't really talking about which Western nation is going to be the first to actually print money and buy Bitcoin. But I think it actually has the potential to be the Swiss National Bank. So something else that caught my attention and turned my attention to this story was this article yesterday in the Bitcoin News website. Okay, we got a brand new website we just launched, but as you can see, Bitcoiners from all around the world are commencing an initiative that they actually created in 2021. So this is the interesting thing. A bunch of Bitcoiners already tried to petition the central bank to do this in 2021. So this, again, let's go back to the source, back to the original. They've been trying this for a long time. This tweet here was from October 2021, in the peak of the bull market, okay? Again, Bitcoin price is back, and we now have petitions trying to force central banks to adopt Bitcoin in one way, shape, or form, which is absolutely incredible. we can see here on the international level, since the BlackRock ETF earlier this year, I think it's reasonable to expect Bitcoin to stay accessible in Wall Street for the foreseeable future. Why would Bitcoin be more of a risk for the Swiss National Bank that, for example, Tesla or Nvidia stock? So they already own Tesla stock. The Swiss National Bank already owns Nvidia, Tesla, Apple, Amazon. Why would they not adopt Bitcoin? Okay, absolutely incredible. We can see Den Lass, a regular here on the channel, says that a famous Danish Bitcoiner pushed it forward in Switzerland with Bitcoin Swiss headquarters there. Okay, thank you for the insights, Den. That's something I didn't know. All Night Hider, another regular on the channel, says Game Theory 101, can't beat them, join them. That's exactly what's happening. That is exactly what is happening right now. We're watching FOMO seep into the space. Okay, obviously they whet their appetite with MicroStrategy in 2023. They own 0.1% of MicroStrategy. Now we're just going to watch other companies FOMO. Speaking of other companies and other banks in Switzerland, a 132-year-old Swiss bank began offering quote unquote crypto services in 2023. Okay, so this came out in the kind of depths of the bear market, I believe. But you can see here, I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, Julius Baer Group. That's going to be my best pronunciation. Is a 132-year-old bank who is now offering its clients, quote unquote, crypto services. So it looks like we're beginning to see a couple of signposts that people in Switzerland are beginning to warm up to Bitcoin. Okay, we can see here, here's another article that breaks down the legal tender situation in Switzerland nicely. You can see there in the flag, Switzerland has already adopted Bitcoin and Tether. Again, it's kind of been my thesis for a while now that countries who, when you have regions, like for example, El Zonte in El Salvador or Bitcoin Jungle in Costa Rica, once you have a region that's thriving on a Bitcoin standard, makes it very, very difficult for the national, government or central bank to come out there and outlaw Bitcoin if you already have a thriving peer-to-peer community. Okay, again, we had the El Zonte Bitcoin peer-to-peer community grow for a couple of years in 2019, 2020, and 2021 before the government actually made Bitcoin legal tender. Okay, I think that if you're trying to pick which government and which country is going to make Bitcoin legal tender next, you want to look at which of those countries actually have a Bitcoin peer-to-peer community. Switzerland's already got one. They have Lugano. They have Bitcoin City. I actually plan to make it out there. It's just very, very expensive to live in Switzerland. So producer Pam and I, we don't quite have the funds to get over to Switzerland yet to check out Bitcoin City. We might do it one day. We're actually thinking about doing a geyser fund, see whether someone would support us and get us over there, because I think it'd be a fascinating thing to watch. And if you actually have a look at the Twitter posts that I know I had somewhere here. 1 second. Sorry, guys. I can't find it. But the Twitter thread that I was showing you guys earlier, there's some incredible scenery in Switzerland. Okay, it's very, very nice country. Lugano, Bitcoin City, it's like right on the water from memory. Again, don't quote me. Okay, here you go. I found an image. Sorry, I found one live. But this is what the city of Lugano looks like. It reminds me a lot of Madeira, which is very, very cool. So I would love to get over there and maybe check it out. Here's another photo of what Lugano, Bitcoin City looks like. Okay, so it's a beautiful place. Pam and I are going to get over there at one stage and check it out. But again, that's Switzerland. McLovin puts it nicely. Bitcoiners have already won. Institutions are trying to catch up, and they can't catch up. Okay, Bitcoin has already won. We're already winning. Okay. With all that said, guys, I think that's a good note to end it on. McLovin's point there. Institutions are trying to catch up. Whales like Mr. 100 are trying to catch up. Okay, if you missed our live stream earlier today, that's actually what we discussed. We discussed Mr. 100, and we even tried to expose the identity of Mr. 100 and kind of had a look at that. So if you didn't see that live stream, you can head on over and check it out. You can see it on screen there. We did it on the Bitcoin News live stream. And with all that said, thank you to everyone who tuned in. We got Dan, we got McLovin, Dan Lass, all the regulars in the chat. See you guys.